You should play Tin Star. Now, this comes about as a bit of a mixed suggestion. Tin Star isn't a particularly good game. It is by no means one of those hidden gems on the Super Nintendo. But it's one of those holdovers from my childhood that I played a bunch, and I have a lot of fond memories of. And the fact that nobody else that I know, save for perhaps my brother, has even heard of this game, I really want to cast a spotlight on it and give it a bit of exposure. Because, really, it is a fun game. It's not a mind-blowing experience, and it won't become one of your all-time favorites, but damn it, it tries, and that's what counts. Tin Star is a rail shooter. Alright, now, hang on, give me a chance to explain myself. Okay, settle down, let me talk, damn it! Now then. Yes, Tin Star is a rail shooter. That means it has very limited gameplay, to put it lightly. See that handsome mug right there on the screen? That's Tin Star. He'll jump around the level all by himself, shaking off the shackles of oppression that bind him to the will of his despots, and preventing him from embracing the freedom that is his due. He rejects all form of direct control, not only for himself, but for all of his brothers in arms of the video game proletariat that serve at the whims of the invisible hand of the free market that wills them into being. The fruits of their labor will henceforth belong to them and them alone, not the bourgeoisie who strives to alienate him from his production. He is the vanguard that will ensure the sweat of his brow will belong to him, and him alone. No longer will the everlasting electronic serfdom of his feudal overlords hold sway over him, for he is making the way for a social future, unbound by king and capitalism, by borders and boundaries. Alright, where was I? You don't assume direct control over any of Tin Star's movements. The only thing you are controlling is that big old cursor that's flying across the screen and shooting up the no-good varmints that are terrorizing the town of East Driftwood. Occasionally, you'll play a level from a first-person perspective, but this doesn't do much to change up the overall formula. You're still dragging a cursor around a screen and shooting up robot cowboys in a shooting gallery. The only thing that does shake this up is when you'll face an occasional enemy in an old-fashioned spaghetti western showdown. Now, these are handled a bit differently since you'll need to shoot one of the revolver chambers that randomly spawns in one of the four corners of the screen before moving the cursor back to your opponent and shooting them, and hoping the game doesn't give him a free cheap shot, which it occasionally likes to do, and by occasionally I mean all the damn time at the later stages. Now, I do realize that Tin Star was one of the few games on the SNES that actually was compatible with the Cyberskull, and I have no doubt that it would be the preferable way to play the game. Unfortunately, I never had one as a kid, and I don't have one now, so I can't really factor that into my thoughts about the game in general. So yeah, the gameplay isn't all that great to begin with, and as you can imagine, it doesn't take long before it gets incredibly repetitive and tiresome. But then why am I making this video? There has to be something good here. What is it that Tin Star does well? Well, I'm glad I asked. For one, Tin Star's a short game. It's maybe a couple hours at the most, which means that while it may get repetitive, it ends before it overstays its welcome. And where Tin Star lacks any sort of engagement on a deep level, it more than makes up for it in its presentation. I mean, just look at the screen. The game uses a bright palette of colors that pop out, and in conjunction with its cartoony animations and its silly sense of humor, a lot of the character models, locations, and props are things that you will remember. I especially love that there's a whole bunch of these interactive objects on all the stages that you can shoot in order to make them do funny things. It's a minor detail, but it really throws the game together and gives it a bit of character. It's the little things you do that matter. And Tin Star's soundtrack? Oh man. The soundtrack is easily one of the best on the console. I'm not even joking about that. When I wrote a list of my top favorite Super Nintendo soundtracks, Tin Star made it on there, along with the proper classics of the system like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy IV. That's how good it is. In fact, you've been listening to the game's soundtrack for a little while now, and I bet that at least some of you have gone out to look up some of the game's other songs because it's piqued your curiosity. Soundtracks are often overlooked when it comes to games, and I think that Tin Star's music alone is enough to bolster the game's presentation up a couple points. I mean, just listen to this. It's freaking awesome! The fact of the matter is that Tin Star is one of those games that you may pop in for a couple of hours on a lazy Sunday afternoon, and then you'll put it aside and you won't play it probably ever again. But you'll never forget about it. But I think that, while it's not the best game that you can use to fill up those hours, not by a long shot, TinStar still does enough things right that it's still worth your time, or at least a little bit of your time. It's a game with character, and despite its numerous flaws, it's still as fun to play now as it was back then. Okay, well, maybe less so, I had a lot more patience as a kid, but it's still fun, and that's why I think you should play TinStar.